You know how people say anything can happen in a year? Well, Melissa, her whole life changed in 8 weeks. Our guest today is Melissa, one of our listeners. Her mom was diagnosed just after New Year's of 2025 and transitioned by March. If your brain still can't accept what happened, you're not crazy, you're just human. Let's get into it. Hey guys, before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that we've opened up for submissions. So if you have a story about loss, about healing, about your loved one that you lost, I'd love to hear it. And we might even feature it on a future show or maybe even have you as a guest on our show. So using the link in the description or any of the links in our bios on our socials, you can submit your story there. And I'm really looking forward to reading them. And thank you in advance for being vulnerable and open with me and sharing with me. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to the My Mom Died podcast. If you are new here, subscribe, follow wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. Our guest today is Melissa, and she is one of our listeners who submitted her story to me. Her mom was diagnosed right after the new year and was gone just 3 months later in March. And today we're going to talk about what it's like when grief hits with zero warning and everything changes extremely fast. And as always, if you want to share your story, navigate to the listener notes below or to any links in our bio and you can share it with me there. And thank you in advance for sharing. It means a really great deal to me that this is a space you feel as though you can share. So, hi, Melissa.
Hi,
How are you? Welcome.
thank you for having me.
I'm really happy you're here, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with our listeners around your grief story. Melissa and I were talking a little bit before the episode got going, and we were just talking about how there's kind of a stigma around grief where people don't talk enough about it. And I really feel like there's so much healing and understanding and this sense of wait, I'm not crazy when you hear other people talk about what they've gone through with grief.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I was just talking to my therapist before we filmed this podcast about this exact thing. So it's a great time to be having this conversation
Look
today.
at that. Look at that. No,
Yeah.
it's always just so as people comment on my post and whatever it is, and they're like, well, yeah, like this is what I went through. I'm like, wow, wait, it's universal? Like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, universal's grief is so universal, but it's so personalized at the same time. So I'm just really excited you're here and I'm really excited to jump in. My favorite thing to always start with is to create a space for you to tell us about your mom. Who was she? Who was she to you? What was your relationship like? Tell us all about her.
So I'm an only child, and I think a lot of only children out there can relate to this because, especially when you're a girl, right? So you're a girl. A lot of people talk about being a daddy's girl, of course, but a girl's relationship with their mom is really special. And my relationship with my mom was absolutely no exception. And so growing up, I had my mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was the mom that, drove me and my friends to all of our activities. She was the one that was there that drove me to school. She picked me up from school. So we had that special bond. She was always there when I needed somebody to call in the middle of the night and, at all hours. She was my best friend. She was my mom. She was my person. When I moved away, when I went to college, she was the one that came and picked me up when I was homesick. She was just kind of the person that was always there, keeping me stable and steady and, looking out for me. I think, it's rosy and rose-colored glasses talking about her, but, my childhood definitely wasn't one that was without difficulties. I mentioned my therapist a little while ago. There's definitely some things that happened that were tough. My mom struggled with alcoholism throughout my childhood and had over 20 years of sobriety by the time she passed, and something she was really proud of. So, she struggled with that, but she was somebody who worked through it and really just was somebody who was able to relate to people in that way. She was somebody who understood my sarcasm, understood my humor, and one of the biggest things that she was really proud of was being a grandma. And so my daughter Kaylee was her pride and joy. So I was moved to the side right in the last
Of
couple of
course.
years.
Yeah.
She was so happy. Peak COVID, I found out that I was pregnant and she was elated. So in the last couple of years, that's really been her pride and joy, and same thing with my dad, the two of them. So my mom and I had a really special relationship. As tough as it was at times,
Mm.
we butted heads. We didn't always see eye to eye, but something she always said to me was, things are going to get better. You're going to come out of the other side of things. She was my biggest cheerleader through everything I've ever been through.
I love that. If you think just kind of wider picture, what was something about her that you still to this day think about that you love the most about her?
She really understood me more than I think I realized. And so she understood me on a level that I am only now really understanding myself. And I think that's probably why she was my biggest cheerleader, because she knew how resilient I am. She knew how smart I am. I think all parents to some degree are their kids' biggest cheerleaders, right? They love us unconditionally, or so we hope. And so she knew at the end of the day that, I was gonna be okay. I was gonna make it through any situation, even when I would call her up and say, "Oh my God, this is the worst day of my life, Mom. I'm never gonna get through this." She would be like, "Melissa, you're gonna be fine. Like, it's going to be okay." And I would say to her, "No, I'm not. Like, you don't understand." And she would be like, "Okay." But I think, she really did understand me. And whether it was my dramatics or my, sarcasm or humor or whatever, she really did get me. And I think I took that for granted a little bit while she was still here. But looking back, it really was my favorite thing about her to be able to call her and have her just listen, that listening ear.
What is one thing that you miss about her that kind of catches you off guard? I mean, for me, I look just like her. So when I see myself in the mirror sometimes, I miss her face because I'm like, wait, like that. I can see her in that. So is there anything for you that catches you off guard in terms of missing her?
It's so interesting because this is still, the first year, right? So, like, I'm still
Yeah.
very new in that grief. I've been through all the firsts, really, except for that first big, like, anniversary of her death. So it's all still processing. For me, it's it's really looking at my daughter and being sad for her. And just for my mom, I'm being sad for my mom, for the two of them, and the loss for both of them, right? Like, even though my mom's not here, and, hearing Kaylee say to me, "Mommy, I miss grandma." And then there's this other piece of things too that we experienced very quickly after my mom passed, of my husband's mother passing. And so my daughter lost two people very close together at a very young age. And so having to explain to her what that was, and or trying to. And so I'm still, I think, trying to process all of that, and really I'm sad for that, and I really miss that for her.
I think about moms in grief so often. Like, explaining to your child what something that you can't even really explain for yourself. I said this in an episode before and I'll say it again. That is a superpower. I have a friend that had twins right kind of after her mom passed. And I said to her, I was like, how do you like manage? Like, you can't stop. I had the opportunity to stop and pause and like take a beat after my mom died. But being a mom, you can't do that. She basically said to me, she was like, something that I find really special is like, I learned how to be a mom from my mom. And so my daughters get to know who my mom is because of the way that I show up as a mom. And I think that's really beautiful. I know that eventually your daughter will look at you and understand how important that was and how impactful that's going to be for her life. And I'm proud of you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, looking back, you said you were talking a little bit about your mom's 20-year journey with sobriety and recovery.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, how did that kind of shape who your mom was to you, watching her in that?
She struggled to accept for a long time, really, what drinking and alcohol was doing to our family. It's just the three of us. And so I think when things finally came to a head and she realized that just because she was functioning, right, she was getting up, she was bringing me to school, she was picking me up, there was nothing like necessarily falling apart till it finally did, and she realized that. It was so interesting because it was like this light bulb went off for her. And everybody's journey with sobriety is different. Not everybody, just like everybody's journey with grief looks different. Like we can go through the same exact thing and lose the same exact person, and our journey with grief is going to be different. So same thing with somebody's sobriety. She was somebody that didn't relapse. She was somebody that didn't necessarily struggle in the same way a lot of people did. And, I was extremely proud of her for that. And when she passed, she, really, really wanted in her final hours to have a Manhattan on the rocks with a twist. She's like, I want to go out with a bang. Like that was my
Icon.
cocktail. Yes. And
Icon.
I wish we could have done that for her. And because she passed so
Yeah.
quickly, we didn't get that to her. My dad and I were so sad.
Wow. What was her name?
Cindy.
Cindy. I should have asked you
Yeah.
at the beginning. That's my
Yeah.
bad. But Cindy, what an icon. Manhattan on the
Yeah.
rocks. All right. So take us back to January. Kind of share that story with us a little bit. And
Hmm.
in the story you shared with me, you talked about how she was kind of feeling sick,
Hmm.
right? And then it went from feeling sick to, okay, this is actually serious. Like, tell us a little bit about when you first noticed, like, and the shift really happened from, okay, she has a cold to something's wrong.
We had celebrated Christmas. We had traveled, my husband, my daughter and I, down to Jersey. We had had this, nice family holiday. And obviously, you gather as a group, there's like germs and things that get passed. In this type of year, we all know that it's a time. And so not long after that, my parents both being, compromised immunely, like they weren't feeling great. My dad fought his battle with cancer in 2022. So he also has to be really aware of like the germs and how like he goes about the world as well. So as soon as they both told me that they weren't feeling well, I was like, okay, do you need anything? Like, what are we doing? I'm always on high alert. And so, everybody thinks I'm always very like overly cautious about those things, but it's just they're also on their own, right? So it was fine. My dad seemed to recover. No big deal. Okay, cool. And my mom, obviously, with COPD, those things linger a lot longer. So that is to be anticipated. It's not a big deal. Cool. It lingered a lot longer than anticipated. And, I was always talking to them often, especially with my daughter. Like she wants to FaceTime, she wants to call grandma and grandpa. And I ended up getting a call from my dad that my mom had fallen and he had to call an ambulance because, he's not with one person and she's dead weight and it's just too much, right? That makes sense. And he wanted to make sure that she was okay. She was in some pain. It didn't seem like a big deal. And I was like, well, I go get her checked out. I understand. And this time of year, it's very, very, very busy. And it was a nightmare, I guess. She's on a gurney in the middle of the hallway. It's, body to body. I'm like, we're like thinking, well, she's going to get more sick being like around all these gross germs and whatever. One thing led to the other. And I could tell that they were trying to, as parents do, and especially in the family dynamics that we have, they were trying to maybe protect me and really going too deep in what was going on. But very quickly, it came out that even though she was there for her fall and just making sure that her body was okay, they had found a pretty large mass in her lung, unrelated to the fall, but probably still related to the fall in some way. And so they, did a biopsy on it and it came back that it was cancer. And so that little fall and that sickness was probably because of the cancer that they later identified.
And what did it feel like to hear? I mean, especially after watching your dad kind of go through his battle and his journey with cancer and watching him beat it, right? Like,
Mhm.
what did it feel like hearing that your mom had cancer? And what was kind of the how much time did they give her? Like, what did it look like after they told you that it was cancer?
I have a tendency to go into this like mode of, okay, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do I'm very like, I'm the organizer, right? Like, as this like only child, like, very self-aware, emotionally intelligent, because of the childhood like trauma and some of the other things that I have been through. This is my like reaction to things where it's not necessarily emotional all of the time. It's this like fix it, figure it out, like what are we doing situation. So I'm like, okay, we need to make the list of the next things that we're going to do. And so it just so happened that she ended up at the same oncologist that my dad had seen. And so I went down. I was like, okay, we're going to this appointment. We're going to ask all of our questions. We're going to figure this out, the treatment. We were very matter of fact, while also, of course, using the side of sarcasm and humor that my mom and I
Of
do,
course.
because
Yeah.
that's what we do to keep things, light. But also, saying like, listen, this is the deal. Like, when push comes to shove, if you don't have much time left, what are we going to do? Like, if you're going to die, how do you want to die? Right? Like,
Mm.
hospice, like all of the things. And so the doctor really wouldn't give us a clear time frame. Um, he, he was very committed to not giving us a clear time frame. And so he was pretty much saying to us that because of the state that she was in with her body, there were a lot of limited options. The tumor that she had, the mass that she had in her lung was treatable with immunotherapy, but there was just so many other factors at play. And really, it was about keeping her alive long enough to be able to give her the treatment that she needed. And to hear that, I think, was scary for the three of us. And so, there was a reality in the back of my mind of, is that really something that's going to happen? And so, there was a lot of back and forth for the next couple of weeks, like driving from Connecticut to New Jersey and back and forth, making sure Kaylee got to see my mom, in a way that she could remember her in a positive light, not somebody who looked sick or acted sick. And so, it was, do you want to fight this or do you want to not? We wanted to make sure my mom had a say in while she could still have a say. That was really important to me. It was important to my mom. And so that was something that we made sure that she did all along the way while she could.
So you're talking about how she wanted a choice. What ended up being her choice? And take me on the journey from kind of letting her have her choice to when you found out that she had transitioned on.
So she made the decision that she wanted to fight. Nobody wants to die. Even the people that decide not to fight at some point or to make other choices in life, they don't come to that decision immediately or lightly. So she decided to fight. Immunotherapies are newer in in the world, but they're established enough that they work. There's been much success, but chemotherapy wasn't an option. There wasn't a surgery option. Her body was not in a state that it was ever going to survive any of that. And that was made really clear by her oncologist. And so she said, I'm going to fight this as long as I can. And I'm going to tell you when I can't anymore. And when I say stop, I mean stop. And that's the end of it. And I said, okay, heard loud and clear. And so we did that. She had, I think, one treatment and she really deteriorated really quickly. My dad was her sole caretaker. She did have some, in home help because when she had fallen that initial time, she had a wound on her body. So there was some in home care for that, but my dad was her sole caretaker, and that becomes a really quick way to burn out physically, emotionally, especially for him having been through his own journey. And so, I was talking to him about, what is this going to look like for you if this continues? Like, how do we want to continue doing this? Hospice, all of these things, and talking to her about, we need to figure something out. Like, this can't continue. And I, had said to her, I want to make sure that this is the journey that you want it to be. I don't want you to feel like a burden because that was always her big thing too. She doesn't want to be anybody's burden ever, hence not talking about anything ever. And so we went to visit one last time as a family, myself, my husband, and my daughter. And I could tell that she was different. She was quiet. She didn't say a lot. She was not really eating. We talked a little bit and she was tired. And about a week later, she fell again. And my dad called me and said that the paramedics said she wasn't going to make it through the night. So I made the decision at that point to obviously go to Jersey, and I went by myself because it didn't feel right to bring my family with me and have my daughter see that. And so I got there and my mom was awake. She was able to talk. She was okay. And she was on an oncology unit and the doctors were positive. They were like, "No, I think we're going to be able to get another treatment in." It was positive. And my dad and I were kind of confused because this paramedic said one thing. I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, we're going to be able to resume treatment." And I went back to Connecticut and it was seeming like we were going to be able to move on and do all these things. And she actually was able to eat and kind of like regain some, consciousness and be alert a little bit. And we would call and she would talk. And then she kind of took another downslide. And it was a couple days after that that you could tell things were rapidly declining again. And that weekend, it was really obvious that things were really going downhill. And that Sunday, which was March 9th, my dad called and he said that her nurse said that it would probably be important for me to come, um, that she probably wasn't going to make it much longer. At this point, it was pretty confusing. We were being told all these different things, and she was still on a college unit. We hadn't transitioned to hospice yet, and so she was being given medications to keep her a little bit comfortable, but nothing that we thought she would be, passing in the immediate future. So I said, okay, I'll come. I'll come. I wasn't fully convinced, but I'll come. I came home, I packed, and I rushed down, and my whole family actually gathered on a floor that only two people are supposed to be visiting at the same time. And so I got upstairs and, I could tell that, yeah, it was not good. And so my dad and I made the decision to move her to hospice. Not hospice that she was obviously going to come home and be or anything like that. And her eyes were open, her mouth was open, but she was alert but not. And my dad signed the papers and there was some discussion about how long somebody like that will, kind of be alive. Um, Nobody could give us an answer. And so we sat as a family, a larger family at this point, my aunts, uncles, my dad and and I really, I had about 45 minutes that I had gotten there. And 20 minutes after my dad signed the paperwork, if that, I was holding my mom's hand and she just quietly took her last breath. And it was, I think we were all very surprised. Nobody was really prepared for that, just based on what the doctors and nurses had said. It was, unexpected. It was quiet and, just that was that. And so it was it was quick in all of the senses from the beginning, really the second or third week of January to March. It was quick in the sense of we don't think, she will pass that quickly to, okay, well, it seems like, she may not be doing so great, to, okay, hospice, to now she's transitioned. Yeah. And that's something that I think I'm obviously still working through and will be working through for a long time. And also something now that we've had to work on having to explain to Kaylee.
You're touching upon something that I don't think people talk about enough, and that is what a roller coaster it is to have a loved one in the hospital and be reliant on. I always say this, I'm very grateful to the hospital staff. I wanna say that now, but, it's a roller coaster of she's better, oh, wait, she's not, and then all of a sudden, like, she's gone, and then
Mhm.
you're to your point, you're left like, "Wait, you just brought me." I feel like I have whiplash going back and forth between, like, yeah, like, "Wait, I thought you just said that she was gonna be fine, like, she was just alert, she was just here," like, and so thank you so much for sharing that with us. Tell me, for me personally, I remember blocking this out a lot, but what really helped you survive the first couple of hours or days after that moment of watching her take her last breath, whether that be mentally, physically? What did that look like for you?
It's interesting because for me, um, I'm somebody who I need a lot of structure, right? So I survive, I thrive on structure. Not only was I like not getting that now in my personal life, it was, exploding, imploding. My life was also imploding. We were having, a lot of things going on there, and I felt like I was letting my work family down. And so I was like, what do I do with all of this? Like, I am letting everybody down. I'm not at home where my family needs me or where my work family needs me. And now my mom is gone. She's the person I would have called to let all this stuff out. Like, what do I do? So, I I stayed for a little while. They allow you so graciously to stay for a little while. They give you a time limit, but they allow you to stay with your loved one for a little while after they pass. So I stayed with my mom for a while everybody left to get some just quiet time with her. And then I went back to my parents' house, and that was really obviously tough. It was just me and my dad, but we needed to then work on the ins and outs of then the reality of what this is. So we were doing that. And then I was just like, I need to go home. Um, but with all of that came work stuff. And so I was trying to navigate all of these other things with my professional life. And so I came home and I had this time off, but I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So I'm like trying to keep myself busy. And so like I went and got a haircut, and I went into the office on PTO just to talk to my work family, because that's my sense of normalcy. And in the organization I work at, which is a small town nonprofit, there's only 7 staff altogether. We're very small, tight knit. I just needed to be in that environment, even for 10 minutes, to say, like, is everything good? Are we good? Are you guys good? And they were like, are you good? And I'm like, well, obviously not, but this is my normal, so I just needed my normal, right? For 10 minutes. And I think, that for me is still something I continue to work through, because it's what I do. I throw myself into work, or I throw myself into those things that provide me with structure. Always in that caretaking role. And so I threw myself into parenting. I threw myself into planning my mom's funeral because she was a Catholic and my dad is Jewish. So he was like, I don't know. And so I was like,
Yeah.
well, I was raised Catholic. And so I was like, well, okay. And so I he helped obviously plan her wake, but I was coordinating the funeral part at our
Mhm.
church that I grew up in my hometown. I was doing those things because those are the things that I could block out the emotional part, and I didn't have to think about the emotions. I could do the facts. I could do, the things that came easy to me in the moment. And I think I stuck with that for a while.
One of my favorite questions to ask is, you're in your first year, and so, like, I know this might change over time, but being within the first year of loss, what did you learn about what actually matters when it comes to life through grief?
I think a lot of this first year has just been autopilot.
Yeah.
And so I'm still figuring that part out. But really, I think what I will say is that, do the thing, do the thing, say the thing, make it matter. Like, we got family pictures taken this year. The last time we had pictures taken was when my husband and I got married. We got engaged when we got married. And like, I'm a totally different person. I look very different. Like, I've lost like 150 pounds or something like that. I'm a different person emotionally, as is he. And so he hates pictures, so, like, we never take them. There's always the joke that mom's behind the camera, so there's 1,000 pictures of him and my daughter, but none of me and my daughter. So we got family photos taken, and when we did that, the photographer that I found just happened to be, like, on a Facebook group. It turned out by chance that she was somebody that lost her mother-in-law and her mother very close together, and this was a couple years prior to my situation, but it it just looked very similar, and even though her mom never met her son, it spoke to me and it spoke to her, and we were like, "We have a lot in common." And we have like around the same birthday, we drive the same car, different color. So we very odd, right? So like
Yeah, the parallels,
we
that's
it's
crazy.
crazy. And like she and I ended up getting dinner together and talked for 2.5 hours. And so like we were like, we're friends now. Like this is a lifelong, friendship that we've
Yeah.
made. And so like do the thing. Get the pictures taken, right? Like if
Yeah.
you want to go skydiving. If you've been sober for 20 years, but if you're if you know you're going to pass and you want a Manhattan on the rocks with a twist on your deathbed, girl, go make sure your family gets that for you. Like do the thing because it's just do the thing. Say the thing. Tell the person you love them. Do the thing.
I've made so many friends through grief, and I love all my friends from my childhood. If y'all are listening, I love you down, but there is something so profound and so special about the friends you meet through grief and the friends you meet, like, while you're kind of going on this through this journey, and it's so beautiful that you found that so soon. I love that. My last question for you, one of my favorite questions to ask, and take as much time as you need. If you could go back to March and sit with yourself and grab yourself by the hands and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?
I think it would be you're gonna survive this. I'm not gonna say it's gonna get better because I'm not gonna lie to myself because the last year has been pretty tough. But like I'm still here. My husband is here. My daughter is here. We wake up every morning and we are here. We have a house. We have our health. We have a beautiful family, right? We are blessed in a lot of ways that when I turn the news on, a lot of people are not. I work in a world where the stories that I hear rip my heart out over and over again. So I really would just take a look at myself and grab my own hands and say like you're going to survive this. It's survivable, you know? I think there are people who say that like, grief gets better with time, it gets easier. And then there's other people who say it doesn't, it's always
Yeah.
gonna it's always gonna hurt, it's always gonna whatever. I tend to err on the side of, I don't know that it will get better with time or fade with time. I think as people, we just learn to cope with it better over time. Um, I think it will look different for everybody. So I'm more of I'm probably just going to cope with it better over time,
Yeah.
especially like as somebody who has a child who actively misses their grandparent and it was old enough to understand the fact that their grandparent was here and then not. Two grandparents were
Mm.
here and then not. So yeah, it's survivable. Like you're going to get through it. You're going to survive it.
It sounds so obvious, but like
Yeah.
you're so right. Melissa, thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm gonna tear up saying this because I always do, but sharing your story and talking about your loved ones is not an easy thing. And I am just so grateful to you for your time and for really just like saying out loud what so many people feel when loss moves so fast and when it doesn't feel real and when your brain can't catch up. And I think that it's just such an important thing to talk about, and I'm just really grateful that I got to talk about it today with you. So thank you so much, Melissa, for coming. And if you're listening and this episode hit you, share it with someone who's grieving in silence. If you want to submit your story to be featured on the show, the listener submission link is in the show description and in the links in any of our bios. And we love you and we're here with you. Melissa, again, thank you so much for coming and for sharing. It means a great deal. It
Thank you
means a
for
great deal to
having
us.
me. I really appreciate
Of
it.
course. Thank you. All right, we're with you. We'll see you next episode. Love you. Bye.